Life and death are natural matters. Yet for King Charles, death seems to be a cruel cosmic irony. He has worn the crown for barely 2 years, and already he faces relentless health crises, forcing the royal physicians into continuous red alert status. According to multiple close sources, Charles has been hospitalized in emergencies more than once, even falling into states of unconsciousness at times. Royal security has been deployed densely around medical facilities believed to treat him. Sudden cancellations of schedules and vague official statements from the palace only deepen public suspicion. Is this a sign of an early abdication or, more gravely, the final stage of a hidden terminal illness? Amid this, another bombshell went off, this time not from the media, but from within the monarchy itself. A handwritten letter by King Charles, written in a near desperate state, has been confirmed authentic by Princess Anne and Prince William. The letter not only shocked them both, but tore open the mask of royal dignity that the British monarchy had preserved for decades. It is not merely a final message, but a self-indictment, indicting Charles himself and the system that condoned the tragedy named Diana. According to the disclosures, in that letter Charles confesses the matters that the public only dare to suspect. The lies, palace conspiracies hidden behind closed doors, the wounds he inflicted upon the woman the world once mourned, all laid bare in the trembling handwriting of a father, a husband, and a king standing on the brink between life and death. William could not hold back tears when he read the part referencing the fateful night in Paris, the irreparable decisions, and the wrong love affair with Camilla, what Charles now calls an irreversible mistake. This is no longer a simple information leak. It is a strategic turning point. Anne and William's joint confirmation of its contents is tantamount to a declaration of war against the forces that would keep silence. They are choosing truth, however harsh, over living in a royal shell built on lies and cover-ups. And in that storm, the name Catherine, Princess of Wales, emerges as a symbol of a new era. Could she be the worthy heir to guide the monarchy through this seismic upheaval and restore the trust lost since Diana's time? What did that letter say that utterly broke William? Why did Princess Anne, once the steel wall guarding royal honor, decide to expose the truth? And above all, what awaits the United Kingdom in the days ahead as its darkest secret is gradually revealed to the whole world? Leave your thoughts in the comments below the video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on the next shocking developments from the heart of the British monarchy. The letter appeared like an icy slash through the illusion the British monarchy spent decades constructing. On the evening of February 26, 2025, when darkness fell over Adelaide Cottage, where Princess Catherine and Prince William were staying while King Charles was repeatedly hospitalized in critical condition, an ivory envelope arrived, bypassing all diplomatic channels and royal security. Scrawled on its front were three trembling words: final confession. No return address, no seal, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It belonged to King Charles. The letter spanned 3 handwritten pages in dark ink with smudged sections. According to Princess Anne's confirmation, Charles wrote it during a rare lucid night following a serious complication in early February. There was no flowery language, no justification. The letter was a quiet confession, and because of that restraint, it carries more weight than any speech he ever delivered to the public. The contents focus entirely on a single name: Diana. Charles admits that he betrayed her not only emotionally but morally. "I did not stand by her when she needed me most," Charles writes. "I allowed pride and fear to control my actions. And worst of all, I let the system define us, rather than defining myself." He spoke of the silent arguments within the palace, where Diana was frequently isolated, monitored, and even seen as a threat to the monarchy's image. He admitted that he backed down under pressure, choosing silence instead of defending the woman he had once vowed to love and protect. "I chose image over truth. I chose the crown over the heart," he wrote in a line that left readers breathless. However, the most terrifying part of the letter did not lie in the regret, but in a single, clearly underlined sentence: "The truth about the bloodline is more complicated than anyone has ever told you." That sentence stood alone with no further explanation, no context, like a cryptic echo lingering in the reader's mind. and that reader was Prince William. For William, that letter struck at the very foundation of his existence: pain, numbness, and then total collapse. Throughout his life, William had lived in the shadow of a loss named Diana, a mother assassinated by the very forces his father had just confessed to. But never before had he felt himself losing everything as he did upon reading the final words of that letter. The sentence, "The truth about the bloodline," kept ringing in his head like a funeral song. It not only made William question the legitimacy of his place within the royal family, but also, for the first time, led him to ask, was there something even bigger being kept hidden? Had Diana ever wanted to tell him this, but never had the chance? Was he truly the rightful heir to the throne, or merely the product of a story too cleverly constructed? In the days that followed, William became unusually silent. He canceled all public engagements, refused to answer any questions from the media, and disappeared from the public eye for nearly 2 weeks. Those close to him described him as floating between two worlds, one of duty and one of a vague truth slowly eating away at his trust piece by piece. In desperation, he began to search. William reached out to those who had once been close to Diana: former bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones, journalist Martin Bashir, who had conducted the shocking 1995 interview, and even a former nurse who had served in the mental health unit at Kensington Palace. He reviewed old records, reread his mother's journals, and tried to trace the real meaning behind that haunting sentence in his father's letter. What William found remains an unsolved mystery, but one thing is clear: the letter opened a gateway to an abyss no one in the royal family wants to speak of, an abyss of identity, betrayal, and the true cost of power in an institution once thought to be unshakable. The story of King Charles' letter is not merely a confession. It is an earthquake that has awakened all the silent fractures at the core of the British royal family, from Diana to William to the future of the throne, which no longer seems guaranteed to be passed on pure-blooded. Will William forgive his father? Does he have the courage to dig all the way to the root of the truth, even if it could destroy the entire Windsor dynasty? And will Catherine, the woman who has always stood behind him, become the one to piece those fragments into a new future, or the next victim of secrets that have lasted far too long? Those questions remain unanswered, but one thing is certain: from the moment that letter was opened at Adelaide Cottage, the British royal family was no longer the monarchy we once knew. A single sentence can change the entire course of a person's life. And for Prince William, that sentence was, "The truth about the bloodline is more complicated than anyone has ever told you." Just one brief line from King Charles' letter was enough to bring down everything William had clung to in order to survive. In an instant, he was no longer sure of anything: not his lineage, not his right to inherit the crown, and certainly not the ideas he had been taught about duty and responsibility. In the days that followed, William seemed to vanish from public life. Schedules planned weeks in advance were suddenly canceled, with no explanation. He was seen walking alone on the grounds of Windsor, eyes empty, steps heavy. No bodyguards, no assistants. Just one man, now unsure of who he truly was within the magnificent universe of monarchy. Staff members who had once worked closely with William described a completely changed man. In closed-door meetings at Adelaide Cottage, he would sit in silence for hours, his gaze distant, sometimes not even responding when asked for input on important matters related to royal titles or international schedules. A prince who had always appeared steadfast had now become distant, even estranged from his own self. The issue wasn't only about questions of bloodline, something no one dared to say aloud, yet old rumors about James Hewitt and Diana's relationship had never truly faded. The real pain for William lay in the feeling of betrayal by the very father with whom he had always tried to preserve a fragile relationship. Though Charles never stated it clearly in the letter, the way he hinted at the complicated bloodline was itself a spark that burned down the entire structure of identity William had built since his motherless childhood. He began to dig through old memories. Every word Diana had spoken, every half-hearted glance from Charles, every time he was compared in the media to Harry, all came rushing back like fragmented pieces of a puzzle he no longer dared to claim as his own. Sometimes in the middle of the night, he would stop in the empty hallways of the castle, staring into a mirror. He would whisper a simple, yet heartbreaking question. If I'm not the son of Charles, then who am I? Meanwhile, the palace entered a state of quiet crisis. Clarence House, still the central hub for matters related to King Charles, was immediately informed of the letter's contents. However, what's worth noting is this. Only a few senior advisors were granted access to the first part, relating to his remorse over Diana, while the part about the bloodline was kept absolutely confidential. An anonymous advisor revealed, "We were only allowed to read one segment, but William's reaction and Princess Anne's total silence made everyone suspect that something far bigger was involved." The royal family's legal teams were activated at once, especially experts in succession and constitutional law. They held several emergency meetings to assess the legal implications of the letter and to evaluate the risks if its contents were ever leaked. Yet no one dared confront Charles directly. The reason was clear. His health had been rapidly deteriorating since being diagnosed with cancer at the end of 2024. Every investigation, every internal discussion had to be handled with a certain level of deference. No one wanted to be the one seen as pressuring a monarch fighting for his life. A senior figure who once worked closely with Queen Elizabeth II shared, "In the past, any doubts regarding legitimacy had to be decisively dealt with. But this time, everything is being kept under wraps, as if everyone is afraid that touching the truth could bring down the entire monarchy." And so that letter, a silent indictment, continued to exist like a lingering ghost in every room of the royal palace. Everyone knew it was there, yet no one dared speak of it, as though the very name Diana could still shake the kingdom, even nearly 3 decades after she left this world. Amid the crisis, only one question echoed, unanswered. If William is no longer certain of his own identity, can the throne still be certain of him? And if not William, who then will inherit the throne of England in a world that is already exhausted by things long kept in the dark? When a king begins to fade before the eyes of his people without leaving behind a clear explanation, it is no longer just a sign of illness, but a signal that a fracture in power is silently widening at the very heart of the monarchy. For King Charles III, that fracture can no longer be concealed. The cancer, confirmed in late 2024, has now eroded not only his body but also his spirit. His rare public appearances have become increasingly forced and shockingly brief. At Garter Day, one of the most solemn and traditional events of the British royal family, Charles appeared for only 12 minutes, his face pale, eyes sunken, and his steps so unsteady that he had to cling tightly to the handrail. It was no longer the image of a reigning king, but the shadow of a man slowly retreating into darkness, silently, alone, and without farewell. He made no statement regarding the shocking letter confirmed by both William and Princess Anne. There was no apology, no defense, and certainly no explanation for the phrase, "the truth about the bloodline," the very words that had pushed his eldest son into an identity crisis like never before. The Privy Council meetings, once held regularly every week, had now become nothing more than a name on paper. National administrative decisions were quietly transferred to the Prime Minister and civil authorities. Charles's absence had become a power vacuum too obvious to ignore. People began to wonder, was the king retreating but too afraid to declare it? Was he choosing silence as a form of abdication, either from exhaustion or from shame? And then the classic question that every dynasty must face when storms arise echoed once more. Who will be the true successor when the king no longer has the strength to rule and the prince is no longer sure he belongs to the throne? Inside the opulent halls of Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere had become stiflingly heavy. Charles's close advisors began to notice that he was letting go, but without declaring it. Meetings were canceled at the last minute. Cabinet reports were returned without any response. Charles spent more and more time in his private quarters or in the royal medical wing, where doctors came and went more frequently than personal assistants. A source from Clarence House described, "Everyone can clearly see that he's no longer fighting, but no one dares to say it aloud. We have no orders, no direction, only waiting and fear." As the king withdrew, something unusual happened, the rising prominence of Princess Catherine. While both Charles and William had fallen into states of silence and personal crisis, Catherine, despite battling her own illness, became the pillar for an entire system on the verge of collapse. International organizations began contacting her team directly, instead of going through the palace as before. Secretaries from major charitable organizations, including the United Nations and the WHO, confirmed that the Princess of Wales was the only one who maintained regular communication and updates. She appeared as a quiet leader amid the chaos, while the king seemed to fade into the background, and the prince was lost. Staff at Kensington Palace revealed that Catherine, though undergoing treatment, still participated in internal meetings via video, continued signing off on humanitarian projects, and most notably, not once refused any call for help from organizations disoriented by the absence of a royal representative. She was not only fulfilling the duties of a princess, but was, in essence, stepping into the role of a queen yet to be crowned. And that is the paradox unfolding at the heart of the United Kingdom. While a king is quietly fading, a woman once seen as the symbol of gentleness is rising to shoulder the weight of an entire monarchy. The final question remains, is this the quiet end of the Charles era and the beginning of a new age named Catherine? An era no longer burdened by bloodline, but founded on integrity, responsibility, and the courage to face fear, even when the full truth threatens to tear the palace apart from within. But even as the king battles time to hold on to the throne, another war is slowly emerging, this time from within his very own family. That is nothing new. The Windsor family for many years has witnessed rifts that once seemed impossible to mend. But what made everything explode was a meeting that took place in the shadows between King Charles and his second son, Prince Harry. When a father secretly meets the son who has stepped away from the royal fold, not for reconciliation, but while keeping everything hidden from the eldest son, the one bearing the burden of the future throne, then it is not merely a private encounter. For the Windsor family, it is a crack deeper than any before, a spark for a media crisis that has been summed up with the loaded phrase, Windsor rift deepens. In June 2025, while the UK was bustling with preparations for Trooping the Colour, the annual parade honoring the king, the press was shaken by a revelation. King Charles had secretly received Prince Harry at Clarence House for less than 3 hours. There was no press release, no official photo, and most notably, not a single word of notice to William. To William, this was not just a lack of transparency, it was a stab in the back. When asked, a spokesperson for Kensington Palace declined to comment, but those close to the Prince of Wales revealed that he felt excluded from critical family decisions. The sense of betrayal was profound, especially in the context of William still struggling with the illness of his wife, Princess Catherine, and the alarmingly waning public support for the monarchy as an institution. Within the royal family, this incident further intensified the silent war between the two brothers. William, the guardian of tradition and loyal to duty, believed that any contact with Harry should be thoroughly discussed. Meanwhile, Charles seemed to be drawn by an obsessive fatherly affection. Though once disappointed and angered by Harry's decision to withdraw, he had always harbored a soft spot for the younger son he once favored most. However, for observers, the issue extends beyond personal emotions. It raises a thornier question. Is Charles trying to call back Harry as a contingency plan for a faltering royal future? Is he afraid that William, with his rigid personality and uncompromising stance, might not be flexible enough to steer the monarchy through its current crisis? As public opinion had not yet settled, another image stirred the media, the sudden reappearance of Prince Andrew, who had been stripped of all royal titles due to a sexual scandal at a private Windsor family event. Though he had no official role in Trooping the Colour, he appeared on the sidelines, beaming and more at ease than ever. Many wondered who allowed him to be there. Was this a signal that Charles still holds absolute power and can forgive anyone, whether Andrew or Harry, if he deems it necessary? In contrast, the absence of several key royals at the parade, especially Catherine and even Charlotte, further fueled doubts about unity. The public could not help but ask, where is the image of a united royal family they so often strive to project? But if those events were merely turbulent waves on the surface, then what truly shook the nation came from the depths of the past, from the woman whose name still haunts Britain nearly 3 decades later, Diana, Princess of Wales. In July 2025, during a routine inventory at the Royal Archives in Sandringham, a group of staff accidentally discovered an old folder buried among files from the 1980s. At first, it seemed to be scattered notes, but the more they examined, the more chilling it became. These were handwritten pages by Diana, recording her thoughts and feelings while living in the palace. At the time, her marriage to Charles was on the brink of collapse. Among these documents, one particular note drew attention, where Diana wrote about the suffocating pressure women in the royal family face, not only from the public, but from the powerful men around them. She emphasized the feeling of being watched, controlled, and isolated. The final line of one page, written in a lightly slanted yet firm hand, circled three names: Camilla, Catherine, Talbot. But that was not all. A leaked photo showed a scrap of paper from 2022 when William and Catherine were facing immense pressure after the death of Queen Elizabeth, on which Diana had written, "Catherine, she will need protection. Don't let history repeat itself." It remains unclear how this piece of paper survived until now, or how it resurfaced precisely at this sensitive moment. But for William, it was a confirmation, a message from his late mother affirming that what he is facing is no coincidence. And more importantly, his mother had seen it all coming. The discoveries from the archives not only sparked a wave of emotion among the public, but also drew intense attention from international media toward the inner workings of the British royal family. Newspapers like The Times, The Guardian, and The Telegraph simultaneously published editorials emphasizing that the past has never left the Windsor family, and that Diana's legacy is not just symbolic, but a living warning. As for the public, those who once shed tears bidding farewell to Diana at her 1997 funeral, this was a wake-up call, a reminder that beneath all the lavish ceremonies and glittering images, there still lie shadows that have never been fully exposed. And that perhaps those old handwritten pages are the truest portrait of loneliness, sacrifice, and warnings to generations of women stepping into Buckingham Palace. Life and death are natural, but for Charles, the looming end may not only be the conclusion of a life, but also the beginning of a new chapter, one where power is not seized by command, but quietly falls into the hands of those who never needed a throne to prove themselves. And in that tide of transformation, a woman emerges from the shadows. Not Camilla, not Anne, but Catherine, Princess of Wales, the silent wife beside William, now becoming the quiet pillar of the entire monarchy. As Charles lay bedridden, Camilla struggled to cling to the slipping reins of power, and William faced his own crisis. Catherine became the anchor for all. No one crowned her queen, no one declared her heir. Yet all eyes began turning toward her. In her rare public appearances, just a nod, a gentle smile, was enough to stir the crowd with emotion, as if they saw in her what they once saw in Diana. Kindness, courage, and an innate quality of leadership that doesn't need to be shouted to be believed. Catherine did not seize power, she drew it in. She did not rise as a commander, but as an anchor, keeping the royal ship from capsizing amid the storm of uncertainty. And that is what sets her apart from the women who came before her. Camilla came with ambition, Diana with heart, but Catherine came with an understanding of the role she would have to bear, and she was willing to bear it when the time came. During Charles's hospitalization, Catherine said little, but she was everywhere, representing the family at charity events, sending messages of support to those in need, and keeping the royal image from being drowned out by a flood of negative news. On social media, she was called the future of the Windsor dynasty. The British press dubbed her a natural-born leader. One royal expert commented, "If the king can no longer rule and the prince is in disarray, then Catherine is the one who has kept the monarchy's image from collapsing." And indeed she has. While William wrestled with his role as a son about to lose his father, a husband shielding his wife from a media storm, and a father protecting three children amid chaos, Catherine quietly took on what William could not shoulder. She was no longer just the support. She became the silent coordinator of everything inside the palace. And from that very moment, the transition of power began, not through crowns, not through proclamations, but through action and presence. William and the future. William has never truly been ready for the role of king. The towering shadow of a complex father, the dark memory of his mother's death, and the burden of a monarchy losing its footing in the 21st century have caused him to hesitate more than once. But as the downfall of the old generation becomes an inevitable reality, William is forced to make a choice. Either maintain the same worn path and watch the monarchy decline or rise, break through boundaries, and build a new model, where kindness and closeness replace ceremony and distance. And it is at this crossroads that Catherine once again becomes the guide. She doesn't merely advise or comfort. She and William are rebuilding the royal image from within. They cancel outdated formalities, enroll their children in public schools, participate in environmental and mental health campaigns, values that resonate with the current era. And when William stands before the crowd, sometimes still lost under the spotlight, Catherine only needs to hold his hand gently, just as Diana once did with Charles, but this time to uplift, not to rescue. A power shift never arrives overnight. It begins with small details. Catherine representing Charles at a memorial service, visiting healthcare facilities while Camilla remains silent, or the way William brings his wife to every important meeting with the cabinet. The public needs no announcement. They see it clearly. This is the couple leading the future. And Catherine, not by title, but by what she embodies, is at the center of it all. Not everyone relinquishes power easily, but this shift does not come from struggle, but from the quiet acknowledgement of the times. As Charles weakens, as Camilla loses support, and as William is no longer alone in facing the burden of succession, Catherine has transformed her own steadiness into a kind of power, gentle but undeniable. One day, the crown will be placed on William's head. But perhaps for many people in the UK and those watching from around the world, the real moment of transition began the very second Catherine stood up, instead of stepping back like every royal bride before her. If there is one thing that the history of the British monarchy has proven, it is this. The darkest moments are always the stepping stones to a new and brighter era. And that era is now gradually taking shape around the image of Catherine, a woman who appears delicate, yet carries within her a strength more enduring than any throne. Without declarations, without powerful titles, she steps into leadership naturally, quietly, yet with undeniable influence. In the eyes of the public, Catherine is not just the Princess of Wales. She is the symbol of a monarchy in transformation. This shift does not come from speeches or grand proclamations. It comes from subtle gestures, profoundly human moments, and most of all from the inseparable bond between her and William, the man who will bear the crown in the near future. In the midst of crisis, Catherine does not retreat. She steps forward, not to replace anyone, but to protect the true values of a royal family under challenge. And now the question is no longer simply, will Catherine become queen? But rather, can she redefine the very meaning of power and loyalty in the 21st century? Share your thoughts. Do you believe Catherine will become a steadfast pillar of the United Kingdom in the future? Leave a comment, like this video, and subscribe to the channel to follow each step of the monarchy's transformation in this new era.